Hi from me, Jared Epstein, and welcome to another episode of SIMCHA, a celebration of life. Today, Miriam Camereni teaches us about the music of the Bund, a Jewish socialist movement. But first up, we get to know author Casey Shevel, a mom of 4 boys, that leads to the type of beautiful, entertaining, relatable chaos and routine that's worth writing a book about.
I grew up in a religious home. My parents are religious. I've been religious my whole life, although my parents were not, so I've got parents who are both only became religious later in life. I went to Yeshiva College for primary school and moved on to Torah Academy for high school. I love Friday night dinners and going to shul, and just sort of very much a part of my life. So although the book is called Mom of Boys, it's not just a book for moms. And it's not just a book for moms or boys. I mean, a lot of people say to me, I'd like to buy it, but I've only got girls. And I'm like, you don't need to have boys to read the book. You don't need to be a mom to read the book. I'm a mom of boys, but you don't have to be. It's really just essentially a book that I wrote for women. And all women of all ages and all stages. I started just, posting stuff on social media about my life. And I realized, and I got such incredible responses. I think that there's such a lack of authenticity in our times, and certainly in the social media platform. So when you come out and you're actually open and honest and authentic about things being hard, about having your struggles, and just being real, it allows people to feel like they're less alone. And I realize that in my writing, I have the ability to actually just say whatever I'm thinking anyway. And my wish is that if I can say these things, that when you read them, you'll feel less alone and you'll be like, okay, it's not only me. I'm not the only one who finds that hard. So essentially, I wrote this book for women to learn to support one another. I didn't purposefully try to have my Jewishness in the book. I think it's just such a part of who I am. So when I was deciding what to write in this book, I told my husband, I was like, I really want to write a book. But there's so many things that I'm so passionate about. I'm so passionate about my matchmaking and about dating and relationships. And I'm passionate about women and helping women, maybe inspiring women. I also want to write about my kids and parenting and some funny things. And I'm also passionate about food. I want to write about recipes and kitchen hacks, how to be a domestic goddess, even though you've used a cake box, because that's my vibe. So I was trying to figure out what I'm going to write on, and then he said to me, well, why does it have to be just one of those things? Why can't it be all of those things? And why can't this book be all of those things? And I was like, you're a genius. Not only did you decide to marry me, but that is the best idea I've ever heard. So I decided to write about all of those things. So you'll find a story about me and growing up in my life, and then alongside it is my mom's recipe for her roast chicken. Or I'm obsessed with making chicken soup. I'm obsessed with making soup, and I hand out soup to anyone who will look in my direction. So I've got my recipe for, obviously, chicken soup, which is, as we all know, Jewish penicillin. So there's things that obviously are just going to filter through in the book, just because it's part of who I am. You're not going to, that's just such a part of my daily life, and the way that I live my life is so, I try to make, please God, it is authentically Jewish, and that's just the things that I do that are part of our, our daily living. So I wrote this book essentially for everybody. I wanted this book to be for all women, not just Jewish women. Yes, I'm a Jewish woman. Yes, I'm a religious Jewish woman. But I wanted my voice to be heard and read to a universal audience. And that was very, very important to me. So I thought it was definitely important to put a glossary in there. All the words that I'm talking about and the shops that I'm talking about, whether it's Kosher World or Moishi's or whatever, recipes for latkes and things like that. Obviously, I've put it all there in the back of the book. When I talk about God, I talk about Hashem. But I want you to understand that Hashem is God, and just to maybe make it a bit more accessible, and the Jewish lingo and the way that we talk a little bit more accessible to a wider audience. One of the chapters in my book that I decided to include is called Latka, which is about my third son, who was born on the last night of Hanukkah. So while I was pregnant with him, we'd nicknamed him Latka, which is a fried potato pancake, I suppose, that we eat at Hanukkah time. And unfortunately, when this baby was born, we had a fine pregnancy and a fine birth, but when he was born, he was very, very sick and he couldn't actually breathe. He had contracted a virus from me in utero, and the doctors weren't sure what was wrong. As he was born, literally his lungs were like a brick, the doctor said, like a brick wall, and he couldn't breathe. And when I said to our pediatrician, who was Dr. Kassel, the famous Dr. Kassel that everybody knows about, and I said, Dr. Kassel, are you telling me that we're praying for a miracle? He said, yes, Casey, you are. You're praying for a miracle. And we straight away named that baby El-Hanan, which means God should have mercy. And I just prayed and prayed that God should have mercy and God should find chen, should find favor in this baby. And he gave us a miracle. And our baby, the community rallied together and everyone prayed for this little baby to live. And not only did he live, he came home with absolutely no breathing problems or issues or delays in development or anything. It was an open miracle. And I've written in the book that when God gifts you with an open miracle, it is incumbent upon you to publicize it. That's why during Hanukkah, as Jewish people, we light our menorah, we light our candles in the window because we're meant to publicize that miracle that God saved the Jewish people during that time, and it's for everyone to see. We're meant to publicize it. So although it was a very personal story for me, my story of my little Latka, who almost wasn't, if God makes a true miracle for you, it's incumbent upon you to publicize it. So that's why I included that in the book. And just a quote that I love, it's not my own quote, it's a quote that a friend of mine sent to me, which is, may we be the woman who fixes another woman's crown without telling the world it was crooked. And I really try to live my life by that we're here to fix other women's crowns and to take the lipstick off their teeth and say, and not let people know, and just support them, and they know that we've got their back.
Jerusalem-born and Italian-raised, Miriam Camereni is a woman of many titles and talents. She's an Orthodox rabbinical student, a performer, and a director. Today, she tells us about the music of the Bund, a Jewish socialist movement which emerged in the last century.
I was born in an Italian Jewish family, and the Italian Jewish tradition is very different than the major Jewish groups that people usually know. So Italian Jews claim not to be neither Ashkenazim, which means the Jews that came from Germany and France and Central Europe and Poland, nor Sephardim, which would be the Jews who came from Spain and then scattered on the coast of the Mediterranean and North Africa. Italian Jews actually came all the way from Rome, according to their own opinion. And my father grew up in a quite observant home. So he is, and therefore we are, quite observant Jews. My mother comes from a very Jewish family, very culturally Jewish, more secular, less observant, but very, very connected to Jewish culture. I would say that everyone on my mother's side is quite artsy and talented for music and connected to theater. And I remember going to the rehearsals very, very often and being absolutely captivated and fascinated and connecting Yiddish and Jewish culture to theater very early on. So I was born in this family on Purim of 1983 in Jerusalem. So I very often say that my love for theater has to do with me being born on the one Jewish holiday in which theater is not just allowed but encouraged So my upbringing was really mixed between this observant family. I went to Jewish school, studied all the Jewish texts and laws and observed them, and doing a lot of theater and music. So Messiah Revolution is a play that we produced in 2017, and a person I was working with who is a clarinetist called Angelo Baselli is a non-Jewish Italian klezmer clarinetist from a city near mine, not from Milan, suggested we do something together, and he proposed that we work on a program on the Bund. So the Bund means league in Yiddish. Yiddish is the language spoken by Ashkenazic Jews, so it sounds like German very much, and it has many Hebrew words and also many terms that come from the Slavic languages that the Jews encountered on the journey east towards Russia throughout the centuries. And it was the very first movement, which later became a party, of the Jewish workers, socialist workers, of the Tsarist Empire, the Russian Empire. It was funded in 1897 in Vilnius, which today is Lithuania, and at the time it was a big city of the Tsarist Empire. And basically it survived until the early 20s, and then it died, the movement, and then it was funded again more in Poland, and it survived another 20 years, and the Bundists were among the most heroic people that fought the battles against the Nazi regime in the two big ghettos, in Vilnius, and in Warsaw. So we really wanted to tell this fascinating story. Of course, Bund was also an alternative to Zionism. It wasn't against Zionism, but it was an alternative. It was a different answer to the Jewish question of where shall the Jews live? Because again, at the end of the 19th century, at the beginning of the 20th century, many Jews, of course, were immigrating to the United States, to South Africa, even to Australia, to whatever it was. Some were considering settling in a very, very difficult land of Israel, in what at the time was Palestine. But there were also people who wanted to stay and fight for a better world, for better conditions for the Jews and for all the working class. So this was the Bund, basically.
1, 2, 3, 4 Arbeitslose sennen mir nicht gehört Chadushim lang in Fabrik den Hammerklang es liegen Keilen kalt vergessen nennt der Schaber See schon fressen gehen mir herum im Gas wie die Gewehr im Pust und Pass wie die Gewehr im Pust und Pass.
And we decided that this was a super fascinating story that had lost its battle with history, as in that's not what happened. Most of them were killed. And the music enchanted us. The music is really beautiful. There were all these Yiddish songs that have to do with revolution and with a better world. And very, very often we realized that there was something very messianic in it. So that is why the play is called Messiah and Revolution, Messiah e Rivoluzione in Italian. And I guess the main shift was that instead of waiting for God to send a Messiah and redeem the world and the Jewish people and whatever, the idea of a Bundist was to go and be the Messiah and bring the Messiah, which again is a very Jewish idea as well, because every one of us is supposed to be the person who does their very best for Messiah to come. So it's not something that is opposed one to another. It's not like either we wait for God to do God's thing and redeem us, or we work for a better world. This is Jewish. This is Jewish religious even. So again, this is the way I work. In other places I did that too. I always challenge, ideas that people think are very fixed, and I want to show them how they are not, and they actually are very close to one another. I always had a very difficult relationship with Zionism anyways, despite, or maybe because being born in Israel, of two parents who were disillusioned with the Zionist idea. They went, and lived in Israel for a while, and exactly after I was born, decided to move back to Europe, to the diaspora, to where their families have been for 2,000 years. So I feel their struggle in my blood. Like I really grew up with this tension between Israel and the diaspora. So the Bund was one of many, many forms that I adopted in my work to reflect on the idea of where should the Jews live, in the diaspora or in Israel. And once we've chosen the diaspora, the Golos in Yiddish, what do we do there? How do we live there as Jews? How do we bring a better world here and now? So the motto of the Bundists is in Yiddish, Wir bleiben do, which means we stay here, we remain here. And this idea of like remainance, of staying, stayed very, very strongly with me. I hope that people walk away from our show with questions rather than answers, challenging truths and ideas they thought were so fixed and stable, because that's not how I live. Like I cannot live with that's how things are. Like there is something deeply, 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 deeply anarchist and revolutionary in me, which I guess I need to, share with the world. So if people come to my show thinking the Jews are this and that, and then, they leave with, maybe not only, that's, I've earned my salary. If they come thinking that all the Jews are Zionists, and then they go away and say, maybe it's more nuanced than that, then that's great. If a Jew comes to my show and thinks all the leftists are anti-Semites, and then he leaves and he's like, maybe not. Maybe there were many Jews that were socialists, and now I'm just saying silly examples, but like to give you the ideas of really like challenging truths and certainties, I guess that would be great. Like if that's what I can be remembered for, amazing. In the end, it's art and it's music and it's theater, so people need to be moved and entertained and maybe cry when it's time to cry and laugh when it's time to laugh. So it's about emotions and feelings, and it's not really about teaching them as you would do in a conference or in a lecture. So that's also part of it, that you need to bring something very complex into a very simple and immediately understandable and experienceable form.
We've spent some time exploring Jewish signs and symbols of late. Today, Rabbi Oshi Darren looks at kosher symbols, and we close the show with Lee Noodleman-Sussman's Yiddish song, Shein Wie Die Levoneh.
So what's South Africa known for around the world? The Big Five, Nelson Mandela, and the diamond. Of course, that precious, most precious of all precious gemstones, represents the ultimate, the highest standard one could ever hope for. And so when the Union of Orthodox Synagogues, which is essentially the body that represents the kosher standard, those who want to look at something when you're walking down the aisle of your local grocery anywhere in the world, you want to know, is this food, does it meet the rigorous standards of kashrut, which needs a discussion for itself, but in essence, the laws of kosher is a scientific application of biblical laws to the way food is sourced and produced. When people want to know, is that kosher? Well, some people will go through the work of verifying how exactly that food is produced and telling you, I know it's kosher, I'm taking responsibility for it. And so when you walk into a supermarket anywhere in the world, you'll find lots of different symbols of different bodies around the world that are taking that responsibility and giving you, the consumer, the message that this food is kosher. So when our local body of kashrut, the Union of Orthodox Synagogues, were creating the brand that people around the world would recognize as this is kosher South Africa, of course, we chose that diamond. But who's doing all that work? For that we have the Beth Din. And they are a group of highly trained, experienced, and of course incredibly scholarly rabbis and justices of the Jewish Rabbinical Court. And they are the ones that are giving you that message of trust and confidence. So that's why in that diamond you see the BD, which stands for Beth Din, or House of Justice, and then the UOS, the Union of Orthodox Synagogues, which is the broader organization that supports the Beth Din and works with them on ensuring kosher products throughout South Africa. And from here, they are sent and exported all over the world, where our Beth Din is recognized and appreciated for holding the diamond standard of kosher in South Africa.
Sometimes love in Yiddish songs is just ordinary, just normal love. There's a big name in Yiddish theater of yesteryear. His name's Joseph Rumshinsky, and he worked very closely with Molly Picon and her husband, Jacob Kalish. And I wonder if the song that he wrote, Shen Vi Di Lavona, As Beautiful as the Moon, is perhaps inspired by the love that he saw between Molly Picon and her husband. And this marriage, this partnership, it had such equality, which must have been a very rare sight indeed for the time. Shen Vi Di Lavona.
That brings us to the end of this week's episode of Simcha, a celebration of life. As always, we'd love to hear from you, so please send us a Facebook message at Spirit Sister Productions. From me, Jared Epstein, and the Simcha team, did you know that Yiddish is essentially a medieval dialect of German, with Hebrew, Judeo-Aramaic, Old French, Polish, Ukrainian, and Russian words all intermingled?